In this video, I'm going to show you how I change the handbrake shoes on a Hyundai iX35 CRDI. First of all, if we go into the car, of course we've got to make the car safe so it doesn't go rolling off when we're working on it, because we need the handbrake down. But even with the handbrake down, we might need to adjust it to allow us to remove the mechanisms. Here in the back seat, we remove this in here with a screwdriver. It should just pop out. That's it. So we come down here and we need to remove this. Two little screws there. And remove this off. And if you look in there, you can see there's an adjuster here. This part is the cable from the handbrake, and these cables go to each side. This is the left wheel's handbrake, and that's the right wheel's handbrake. For this, it's a 12mm socket. I use a deep socket because it's got to go right over these threads here. I also use an extension on a ratchet, and we need to free this off. Okay, so there's plenty of slack there now. I've jacked the car up and put some blocks under, so I've already took the wheel off. First of all, we need to remove the brake caliper, and there's two bolts for that, one here and one here, and that's a 14mm socket. Them two out. Okay, the caliper should just now pry off, just like that. I'll put that over there on something so that it's not, we don't want it dangling like that in case it damages the pipe. So we'll place it on there so it's holding its own weight for a moment. Now we need to take this part of the caliper off and the brake pads, and for that we need to remove this bolt at the back here, and there's also a bolt down here, so we have to remove this arm first. And that's a 19mm nut that side, and of course this is the bolt 19mm, so that's undoing nicely. Okay, so the nut's off now, and this will just come out once we've turned it enough times. There we go. I personally give these a tap at the bottom. That's now allowed us to get to that bolt that was hidden behind this. And of course there's another bolt there, so we've got the two bolts now to undo. That one and that one. And again, they're 14mm. First one. To get to the second one, I'll use an extension, but the same size socket, of course. This caliper should now lift off, which it does, bringing the brake pads with it. I don't need to change these pads, so I'm keeping them like that for now. Okay, so now we've exposed the brake disc, and we've got to remove the brake disc to get inside there and change the brake shoes for the handbrake. So what's stopping us now? We've got Phillips headed screws, one there and one there. These can be quite tight. Okay, so there they are, they're out now. Obviously we need to make sure the handbrake is in its off position, allowing this to be loose, but also we need to loosen off the brake shoes inside there a little in order to pull this away. And we do that by removing this cap here. It's just a little rubber cap. And then we rotate this drum so that this hole is directly at the bottom there. And inside there is an adjuster, and we adjust it by putting in the screwdriver and pushing up like that on the little ratchet inside of there. And what I was doing was rotating the front upwards like that by levering it like that. So I'm just releasing the tension of those shoes. There we go, that's enough. The shoes, you can see these have and desperate need of being changed. But that little ratchet that I was just adjusting is there. And what I was doing was rotating it upwards. That allowed the shoes to contract in that bit more. Okay, so the way I do it is I first remove this retainer with the spring and this retainer with the spring. Then we can start to take them off the top. I just gently grab it with a pair of pliers. I know these are side cutters, but I'm going to go very gently with this. Just grab hold of the front there, find it easier with a pair of side cutters, and see if you can rotate the middle. It needs to rotate so that it comes out of this part of the retainer, and I'll explain once I've removed it. Okay, so I've managed to turn it so that the spring has popped off. Okay, so I've removed them two so we can have a look at it. Now you can see the top of that part here, this shaft part, it's got those little wings at the top. Now when this is going into place and when you're removing it and fitting it again, if you look inside there, you can see you'd be able to fit this in one way, the way it is now. So it'd go in like that, and then it needs to turn, and then it's locked in. So that's how it goes back in. And to remove it, you'd need to push down the spring, turn that like that, so it pops off. So I'm now going to do that with the other shoe. Right, so now both retainers, both of them, have been removed. This is nice and loose. So we can look at pulling this off now. I find it easier to get a screwdriver and pop it in the hole where the retainer was, and then lever. Like that. It separates and the adjuster drops out. That leaves a nice gap there and slackens everything off. At this point, the bottom spring that's been holding everything on at the bottom sometimes pops off, and it has this time. So that's great. Now this can be moved this side. Now the bottom is nice and loose. We've only got to deal with the top. Should be easy enough. Okay, so I've pulled the top of the shoe from out of this little area here where it sits, and that's slackened everything off lovely. And there, it's all fell to bits. Great. If when you've taken these two springs out, you don't know which one goes to the top or the bottom, the one with the longest hook goes at the top. This here, this caliper, you can make sure it's nice and free if you like. In fact, you're best making sure it's nice and free. So this is nice and free already. I've just squirted it with some WD-40, that's okay. So we've got the new shoes to put on. Okay, so this is the way I rebuild them. It's just my personal preference. So I bring them together like that. I put in the spring, bring them together more if I need to. Then I put the adjuster in like that. Okay, so that it's all in together like that. Then I just move the top outwards. Okay, I find that a simpler way of doing it. I can now pick this up as it is and then place it in. Okay, this side goes in there like so, and the other side goes into that notch there on the caliper. Then we lift the whole lot up because we want the tops to go inside these crevices here. Okay, so we've got to put the top spring back in. I'm going to use the same spring, it's not too bad. But before I put that in, I'm going to put the retainers in. That's just my personal way and my personal preference of doing it. So this goes in again from the back. Place it through there and it pops through that hole like so. The retainer goes over it and we put it on like I explained earlier. It can be a bit tricky because you have to really push the spring in to do so, and then you have to turn it. Okay, so I've just managed to do that. I pushed one side with my thumb and the other side with a screwdriver like that, and pushed it in and turned at the same time. That worked for me, but obviously be careful if you've got a screwdriver near a finger. I'm not telling you to do it the way I'm doing it, I'm just showing you how I do it. Hopefully then you'll be in better stead to do it yourself. Obviously keep your safety in mind. Just make sure that that centre is turned enough so that it isn't going to fall back. As you can see, that has actually turned 45 degrees away from the slot, so it's not likely to fall back in there. Okay, so this side's nice and secure. And now just the same with the other side. Okay, now that the second one's in, we've got them both in now, we're going to put in the spring. I personally take the spring, I put one side in first, like that, push it down into place. Okay, so push it down under the caliper like that. And as you can see, it's quite a distance from where it needs to go. So I use a screwdriver to stretch it out, and I use something to push across as well. There, I've just managed to get the hook just on the outside of it. And then I'll lever it in. There, it's snapped in now. In that side, in that side. And this side now is all on nicely. The retainers, the adjuster, the bottom spring, top spring, and it's all in the caliper really well. Okay, so now I'll put the disc drum back on. I clean out the inside and just go around it with some sandpaper to roughen the edges up that the shoes will be touching. I'm not saying this is a necessity, but it is something I like to do, and I do know a lot of people that do the same. Okay, so this is ready to go back on. Just make sure you put it on the right way, and that is to make sure those little screw holes match up there where they should do. Okay, so the screws go back in. Both sides. Okay, so I'll build the brakes back up. First on is this part with the 14mm screws, one here and one there in that awkward place in the centre there. 14mm socket again. This arm can now go back down into place. Bolt in and nut back on and tighten it up real good. Okay, so now we can refit the brake caliper. This shouldn't need any adjustment when you slide it back on, because it'll be in the same place you slid it off from, because you're not replacing the pads, so they're not going to be wider than what you've already got. Okay, bolts in and then one down at the bottom. Okay, 14mm socket again, give a good tighten. So the way I align the shoes inside, I'll screw this up enough, and then we're pushing down on that ratchet type mechanism, and it's screwing out at the bottom, making those shoes spray out. Just keep trying. It doesn't move, it's on the brake. Because it's sprayed out both sides, it's kind of brought them into the centre and aligned them. So now I'll just back it off slightly until it's just free again. There, that's lovely. So now we'll put the little rubber grommet back in, and the wheel is ready to go back on here. And so now we do the other side exactly the same as this. We'll tension the handbrake back up to take out the slack, and we'll put everything back together. And there it is.